There's a moment most people never talk about. Not the breakup, not the silence after, not even the grief, because you've heard about all of that. The moment I want to talk about is quieter than any of those. It's the moment an avoidant person sits in a new relationship, or sits alone on a Tuesday night, or scrolls through someone new's messages and feels something they cannot name. A kind of hollow, a specific missing that doesn't fit any word they own. And the question that surfaces, slowly, the way things surface when you've been running from them for years. Why doesn't this feel the same? That's where we're starting today. Not with your pain, with theirs. Because I think there's a question underneath everything you've been carrying that you haven't quite let yourself ask out loud. And it goes something like this. Did they even feel how real this was? And I want to answer that honestly. Not to give you hope, not to pull you back in, but because you deserve the truth about what was actually happening inside the person who kept pulling away from you, even when you were doing everything right. So, here's the first question. The deceptively simple one. Did the avoidant person actually feel anything deep with you? And the answer is yes. But here's what's uncomfortable about that yes. It's that they probably didn't know it while it was happening. The paradox at the core of avoidant attachment is that avoidant people have the same attachment needs as everyone else. They just learn to push those needs so far below conscious awareness that they often don't recognize them. You know what that means for you specifically? It means the connection was real. The warmth was real. The moments where you felt close, those were real. They just weren't something the avoidant person could hold on to without their entire nervous system firing off alarm bells. Avoidant attachment is a relational pattern in which closeness, dependency, or emotional intensity begin to feel threatening rather than soothing, especially as intimacy deepens. So, the deeper you went, the more they retreated, not because you became less, because you became more real, more present, more necessary. And necessary is the thing they've been trained, since before they had language for it, to survive without. That's the first layer. But here's the next question, the one that gets a little sharper. If they felt it, why did they keep pushing it away? And this is the part that changed everything for me when I finally understood it. According to attachment researchers Shaver and Mickelinser, avoidant people deactivate their attachment system when they feel that seeking support or closeness isn't viable. Deactivating, that's the word. Think about what that means for a second. They don't disconnect because they don't care. They disconnect because some part of them learned, probably in childhood, probably in ways they can't fully remember, that caring leads to pain, that needing leads to loss, that the safest thing to do when someone starts to matter is to turn down the volume on that mattering before it gets loud enough to hurt. Avoidant people build internal models that say, others won't be there when I need them, so I must be completely self-reliant. Mickelinser and Shaver call this deactivating the attachment system. Imagine a child, 3, maybe 4, who learns that their emotions are unwelcome. Crying results in eye rolls. Seeking comfort earns them a lecture, so they stop. But not because the need disappears. Sit with that for a moment, they stopped. But the need never disappeared. And here's what I want you to understand about your relationship specifically. You were not just another person they deactivated around. You were probably the first person in a very long time, maybe ever, who made deactivating genuinely hard work. Because you saw them, you paid attention, you were warm in ways that didn't come with conditions, and their nervous system, even while it was pushing you away, was also registering something it had never quite registered before. This one is different. Most people get this completely wrong. They look at the avoidance withdrawal and think it means indifference. But research from Mikulincer and Shaver suggests something more complicated. An avoidant person may present as very calm in a distressing situation, when in fact their internal experience is quite the opposite. Psychophysiological studies show elevated heart rate and cortisol levels in such individuals when they are stressed by separation or loss. They were not unbothered. They were trained to look unbothered. So now we arrive at the deeper question, the one that's been sitting underneath everything. What actually happens when an avoidant person loses someone who genuinely reached them and then tries to replicate that somewhere else? This is the part nobody warns you about, not the part where they seem fine after, that you've probably already seen, the part that comes later, months later, in a new situation with a new person where everything is easier, less complicated, lighter, where there's no push and pull, no emotional weight, no difficult conversations, and they feel nothing, or more accurately, they feel the specific nothing that comes from comparing everything to something that once felt like something. For the avoidant person, this push-pull dynamic can feel like self-sabotage, as their protective behaviors may undermine the very connection they genuinely crave. The relationship becomes a confusing space where closeness feels threatening, yet distance brings a profound sense of loneliness. They wanted the distance. They got the distance. And now the distance is just empty. Here's why. For the partner who wants more continuity, more presence, more emotional contact, being in a relationship with an avoidant can be uniquely painful. The longing isn't met with cruelty, but with absence. But what nobody tells you is that the reverse is also true. For the avoidant who finally lets someone in, even partially, even imperfectly, losing that person doesn't land the way they expected. Attachment avoidance is proposed to underlie what researchers call delayed grief, where attachment-related thoughts and emotions are suppressed and urges to seek support are inhibited. Individuals high in attachment avoidance are thought to respond to grief with a deactivation of their attachment system, leading to a loss of access to thoughts and images of lost loved ones. Delayed, not absent, delayed. And this is the part that changes everything, because what gets delayed doesn't disappear. It waits. It surfaces when the defenses are down. It surfaces in the middle of something completely unrelated. It surfaces when someone new says something in the wrong tone or makes a joke that doesn't land the way yours did. And the avoidant person gets very quiet and doesn't fully know why. And now the question gets personal. What does it feel like when an avoidant person realizes that what they had with you was not something they can just find again? Honestly, I don't think they announce it. I don't think they call you and confess it. I don't even think they fully let themselves know it consciously for a long time, because knowing it would require a kind of vulnerability they've spent decades building defenses against. No one wakes up one day and thinks, I can be pretty avoidant at times. Coming to this realization can be a real slog, and often it's only feedback from others that gets us to start thinking about what kind of attachment style we have. But something shifts. Maybe they're in a conversation with someone new, and the person says something safe, something easy, something that requires nothing of them. And instead of feeling relief, they feel bored. Not just regular bored, specifically painfully bored, in the way that happens when you've tasted depth and now everything else tastes like water. Maybe they have a bad day, the kind where you used to be the first person they'd reach for, even if they didn't always reach. And they look at their phone, and they don't reach for anyone. And the absence of reaching for you feels different from the usual absence. It feels like a door they close themselves that they now can't find the handle to. Avoidant attachers are more susceptible to social loneliness and isolation. Even when they do engage in dating and relationships, those relationships are usually casual and short-lived. And here's what that creates over time. A particular kind of loneliness that isn't about being alone. It's about being with people and still feeling alone. It's the loneliness of having built a self around not needing, and then slowly, quietly discovering that the not needing has a cost, and that cost has a face, and the face is yours. Regression. Analyses from research on attachment styles confirm that both ambivalent and avoidant attachment styles are positive predictors of emotional loneliness. Think about that. The people most likely to insist they don't need closeness are also the people most likely to end up in deep emotional loneliness. Not social loneliness, not the loneliness of being alone at a party. Emotional loneliness, the kind that lives inside your chest even when someone is right next to you. So, now we arrive at the question you actually came here with. Does that mean they'll come back? Does that mean it was real? Does that mean you should wait? And I have to be honest with you here, really honest, because this is the part where the answer branches, and which branch matters enormously. Sometimes the realization that you were irreplaceable cracks something open in an avoidant person. Sometimes the grief, delayed as it is, becomes a mirror, and what they see in that mirror finally becomes more painful than the fear of vulnerability. Michellinser and Shaver's work notes that avoidant attachment shows a certain plasticity, meaning therapy can foster more secure tendencies. Change is possible, but only when the avoidant person decides that their pain is finally louder than their protection. You cannot make that decision for them. You cannot love them into it. You cannot weight them into it. You cannot shrink yourself into exactly the right shape so that their fear stops being a fear. The avoidant child learned to suppress emotional expression and reduce reliance on the attachment figure. The attachment system gets deactivated, not because the need for closeness has disappeared, but because expressing it was consistently unrewarding. That rewiring doesn't happen because someone waited patiently outside their door. It happens because they choose to go find the door themselves. And here's the thing about you, the thing I actually want to sit with for a second. You came here asking whether it was real for them, but I want to gently ask you something different, because I think the more important question is this. Was it real for you, and are you honoring that realness by staying where you are? Because here is what I see in so many people who loved avoidant partners and are now somewhere in the aftermath. They are still, weeks, months, sometimes years later, measuring their own worth against whether the avoidant person comes back, still waiting to feel confirmed, still carrying a love that was real and profound and completely worthy of being felt fully somewhere safe. And I want you to hear this. The connection you felt was not an illusion. Avoidant people have a natural desire for connection, just like everyone else. But they also feel the need to keep their distance to maintain control. It's a constant balancing act between wanting closeness and fearing it. You were not imagining the warmth in the good moments. You were not making up the depth. You were loving someone whose longing for you was real, and whose fear of that longing was also real. Both things were happening at the same time. Both things were true. But here's the quiet insight I want to leave you with. The moment an avoidant realizes no one else feels like you, that is their moment. That is the moment they have to reckon with what their patterns cost them, with whether the independence they protected was worth what they gave up to protect it. That moment belongs to them. Your moment is different. Your moment is the one where you stop waiting to be confirmed by someone else's reckoning, where you stop letting another person's delayed grief set the pace for your own healing, where you look at what you brought to that relationship, the depth, the patience, the willingness to stay, and you claim that as yours, not as evidence that you weren't enough, as evidence of exactly who you are. You are not someone who loves halfway. That is not a flaw. That is not too much. That is the very thing they couldn't stop thinking about after you were gone. The question is not whether they'll realize it. The question is whether you'll stop needing them to.